Welcome back, everyone. Ready to dive into a new topic today?
Absolutely, and this one's particularly relevant for those prepping for the UPSC exams.
Definitely. It's all about green GDP, something that's been making headlines thanks to a pretty innovative move by Chhattisgarh.
That's right. Chhattisgarh has actually become the first state in India to link its forests ecosystem services to its green GDP calculations.
Okay, I think we need to break that down a bit. What does that actually mean in practice? For our listeners who are focusing on the UPSC, they'll know that sustainable development and the rural economy are always hot topics.
Right, so basically Chhattisgarh is recognizing that its forests are crucial for sustainable development. We're talking clean air, water regulation, biodiversity, all those vital
And
things.
those things have economic value, right?
Exactly, and that value often gets overlooked in traditional GDP calculations.
So Chhattisgarh is saying, hold on, our cores aren't just about timber. They're contributing to the economy in other ways, too.
Exactly, and that ties directly into the rural economy, especially in a state like Chhattisgarh, where almost half of the land is covered in forests.
Can you give us some specific examples of how those forests are contributing to the rural economy?
Sure. Think about non-timber forest products. Tendu leaves, for instance, are a big source of income, especially in tribal areas.
Because they're used to wrap beaties.
Right, exactly. And then there's lac, a resin used in all sorts of industries. And of course, you've got honey, medicinal plants, all sorts of valuable products that are supporting livelihoods in local communities.
So this approach to green GDP is recognizing the value of those resources.
Precisely. And it brings us to the heart of why green GDP is such a big deal. Traditional GDP often misses the environmental costs of economic growth, you know?
It's like celebrating a booming industry without acknowledging the pollution it might be causing.
Exactly. Short-term gains masking long-term consequences.
Oh.
And that's where the idea of green GDP comes in.
Trying to get a more complete picture.
Yeah, integrating the value of natural capital, those ecosystem services, into the economic equation, asking how can we grow without depleting the very resources that sustain us?
And this isn't just a Chhattisgarh thing. This idea is gaining traction globally, right?
Absolutely. The UN's System of Environmental Economic Accounting, or SIE, is trying to create a standardized framework for calculating green GDP.
So countries can compare apples to apples, so to speak.
Exactly. And then you've got the World Bank's Wealth Accounting and Valuation of Ecosystem Services, or WAVES.
Catchy acronyms.
It helps countries figure out the true value of their natural assets, not just for immediate extraction, but for the long term.
It sounds like there's a growing recognition that a healthy planet and a healthy economy go hand in hand.
And for those of you gearing up for the UPSC, understanding these nuances is essential. Sustainable development, green GDP, these are concepts that could definitely pop up on the exam.
Definitely worth paying attention to. Now let's shift gears for a moment and look at some other news items that are relevant for the UPSC exams. The World Trade Organization, or WTO, recently celebrated its 30th anniversary.
30 years of shaping global trade. The WTO, with its rules and agreements, plays a massive role in international relations and economics. Understanding how it functions is crucial, especially for the UPSC.
Absolutely. And some of the key agreements under the WTO, like TRIMS, TRIPS, and the Agreement on Agriculture, often make headlines. They have real implications for India's economic policies.
Definitely. TRIPS, for instance, which deals with intellectual property rights, has been at the center of debates about access to affordable medicines. And then you have the Agreement on Agriculture, which affects India's agricultural subsidies and its position in global agricultural trade.
It's about understanding how these agreements can be used to promote India's interests while navigating the complexities of global trade.
Right. And speaking of navigating complexities, let's jump into the digital realm. The government has released the draft Digital Personal Data Protection Rules for 2025, which aim to implement the DPDP Act of 2023.
Now, this is an area you really don't want to skip in your UPSC prep. Data protection, privacy, digital rights, these are becoming more and more important in governance and ethics.
The DPDP Act is all about giving users more control over their personal data, outlining their rights, and setting obligations for those who handle that data.
So understanding those key provisions, the implications for individuals and businesses, and the broader debate around data privacy is going to be crucial for the exam.
Definitely. And while we're on the topic of important policies, the Foreign Trade Policy of 2023, or FTP, has seen some recent amendments.
It sets a target of $2 trillion in exports by 2030. That's a pretty ambitious goal.
It is, and it outlines a roadmap for India's economic engagement with the world. But it's not just about numbers. Initiatives like districts as export hubs aim to promote export-oriented growth at the grassroots level.
And the expanded EPCG scheme is designed to boost domestic manufacturing by making it easier to import capital goods.
It's a multi-pronged approach to enhancing India's global competitiveness. Understanding the ins and outs of these policies is going to be super helpful, especially for those aiming for the Indian Economic Service.
Now, shifting gears to infrastructure development, the Ministry of Commerce and Industry recently released the 6th edition of the Logistics Ease Across Different States, or LIDS, report for 2024.
LITS provides a comprehensive assessment of the logistics landscape in India, ranking states based on their performance.
It uses both perception-based and objective data so you get a more holistic picture.
Exactly. It helps policymakers improve the efficiency and reliability of logistics networks by highlighting best practices and identifying bottlenecks.
And for those focusing on geography or even general studies, this report offers valuable insights into regional disparities in infrastructure, the challenges, and the opportunities in the logistics sector.
Now, let's dive into the fascinating world of science and technology, a topic that always seems to find its way onto the UPSC exam. Researchers have been making some interesting progress with melatonin, the hormone that regulates sleep.
Melatonin. What's the connection to cutting-edge science?
Well, scientists have developed a nano-formulation of melatonin that shows promise as a potential treatment for Parkinson's disease.
That's incredible. Parkinson's is such a debilitating neurological disorder. Any potential breakthrough is huge news. So how does melatonin factor into this?
It seems this nano-formulation could trigger a process called mitophagy.
Mitophagy. Try saying that 3 times fast.
Right. It basically removes damaged components within cells, specifically targeting mitochondria.
Kind of like cellular housekeeping, getting rid of the dysfunctional parts.
Exactly. And by doing so, it could potentially protect brain cells and slow down the progression of Parkinson's.
So while more research is needed, it's a really promising development.
Absolutely. It highlights the potential of nanotechnology in medicine, which is definitely something to keep an eye on. And speaking of pushing boundaries, the UK has developed a quantum-based atomic clock.
Atomic clocks are already incredibly precise. I can't even imagine how much more accurate a quantum version could be.
It's mind-boggling. Think losing less than 1 second over billions of years.
That's some serious accuracy. What are the potential applications of that level of precision?
Well, it could revolutionize GPS, making it even more accurate. It could also have implications for advanced weapon systems and even fundamental physics research.
It's amazing how advancements in one area can ripple out and affect so many others. Now, zooming in on some updates regarding key institutions in India, the Genetic Engineering Appraisal Committee, or GEAC, has revised its rules for selecting experts.
The GEAC plays a crucial role in regulating genetically modified organisms, or GMOs, in India.
And the new rules really emphasize transparency and accountability.
Exactly. Experts now have to disclose any conflicts of interest, which helps ensure that decisions about GMOs are made with integrity and are based on scientific evidence, not personal bias.
Given the sensitive nature of this technology, that transparency is really important. And in other institutional news, the Island Development Agency, or IDA, held its 7th meeting,
The IDA is all about holistic development of India's islands.
promoting sustainable development in these unique and fragile ecosystems.
Their work is particularly relevant for those studying geography and environmental science. It highlights the challenges and opportunities of island development, everything from infrastructure and connectivity to tourism and ecological conservation.
It's a fascinating area where economic development, social equity, and environmental sustainability all intersect.
For sure. And now for something completely different. The Ministry of Finance has launched a revamped e-auction portal called BankNet.
BankNet is focused on resolving what are called distressed assets.
It brings together information on e-auction properties from all public sector banks, making it easier for potential buyers to access those listings and participate in the auctions.
It's a move toward greater transparency and efficiency in the resolution of non-performing assets, which is key for a healthy financial system.
Definitely. And let's not forget a significant development in the legal domain. The Supreme Court has issued a ruling regarding the jurisdiction of the CBI, the Central Bureau of Investigation.
This ruling clarifies that the CBI doesn't need consent from a state government to investigate cases under central legislation.
Even when those cases involve central government employees posted in that state.
It's a big clarification that could impact federal-state relations and the powers of central investigating agencies, a topic that's frequently covered in the UPSC syllabus.
Absolutely. Now, shifting our focus to global health, There's been a concerning surge in human metapneumovirus, or HMPV, cases in China.
HMPV.
It's a respiratory virus, mostly affecting children. It causes symptoms similar to the common cold.
So not usually serious, but a reminder that infectious diseases are still a major global health challenge.
It definitely highlights the importance of global surveillance, strong healthcare systems, and international cooperation when it comes to emerging health threats.
And finally, we want to take a moment to acknowledge Rani Velu Nachiyar, a remarkable figure from India's past.
The Prime Minister recently paid tribute to her on her birth anniversary, highlighting her courage and leadership in resisting British rule.
Rani Velu Nachiyar was a queen from Tamil Nadu who fought fiercely against the British in the late 18th century.
She's known for her military prowess, her alliances with other rulers like Hyder Ali of Mysore, and her innovative tactics in warfare.
Her story is a testament to the strength and resilience of women leaders throughout history, figures who are often overlooked in traditional narratives.
It's a reminder that India's fight for independence involved contributions from leaders across different regions and backgrounds, all playing their part in the larger struggle.
Rani Velu Nachiyar's legacy is an inspiration, showcasing the power of courage and determination even in the face of incredible adversity.
Her story is definitely worth exploring further, for those interested in history and especially for anyone seeking inspiration from those who came before us.
And on that note, let's take a short break. We'll be back in a moment to continue our exploration of these fascinating topics and more.
It really is. Her story is a great reminder to look beyond the usual sources for inspiration. And speaking of inspiration, let's shift gears to a field where India is making some serious waves: space technology. Did you hear about that startup from IIT Bombay, Manastu Space?
Vaguely, yeah. Something about a propulsion system.
Yeah, they just successfully tested their green propulsion system in space. It's called VYOM2U.
Green propulsion. That sounds interesting.
It uses eco-friendly propellant, so it's got a much smaller environmental impact. And get this, they used ISRO's PSLV Orbital Experimental Module for the test. Yep, POEM. It basically turns the fourth stage of ISRO's Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle into a space-based laboratory. Gives startups and research institutions a chance to conduct experiments in space.
Without having to launch a whole satellite. That's pretty clever.
Right. It makes space-based research much more accessible, especially for smaller players. And the latest version, POM4, has even more capacity so they can do multiple experiments at once. It's a huge boost for the Indian space ecosystem.
Definitely something to keep an eye on, especially for those UPSC aspirants out there who are tracking India's scientific advancements. Now let's circle back to a topic we touched upon earlier: governance. There have been some interesting developments regarding the Genetic Engineering Appraisal Committee, or GEAC.
Right, the GEAC. As we discussed, they're responsible for regulating genetically modified organisms, or GMOs, in India. And the recent changes to their expert selection process are a step towards greater transparency.
Transparency and accountability, which are both so important, especially when you're dealing with something as complex and potentially controversial as GMOs.
For sure. And for UPSC aspirants, this highlights those ethical considerations around science and technology.
Exactly. How do we balance the potential benefits of GMOs with concerns about their impact on biodiversity, on traditional farming practices? It's a tricky question.
And the GEC's job is to navigate that complexity, to make sure decisions are based on solid scientific evidence and with the public interest in mind.
Speaking of navigating complexity, the Island Development Agency, or IDA, held its 7th meeting, and they emphasized the importance of a balanced approach to island development.
A balanced approach, absolutely. Recognizing that those island ecosystems are unique and fragile, finding ways to harness economic potential while safeguarding the environment, preserving cultural heritage. It's a tough balancing act.
For those focusing on geography or environmental studies, the IDA's work is a great case study in sustainable development.
It really is. And on a similar note, the launch of that e-auction portal, BankNet, shows the government's focus on transparency and efficiency in the financial sector.
BankNet is all about streamlining the process of resolving distressed assets. Right.
Yeah, making it easier for banks to recover their dues, which helps strengthen the financial system as a whole.
Now, switching gears to the legal realm, the Supreme Court's ruling on the CBI's jurisdiction is a significant development, especially for those of you focused on polity and governance.
Big implications there. The ruling clarifies that the CBI doesn't need consent from a state government to investigate cases against central government employees, even if those employees are working in that state.
So it potentially changes the dynamic between the central government and the states.
And raises questions about the powers of central investigating agencies. Definitely a topic worth diving into for your UPSC prep.
Absolutely. And speaking of things worth exploring, the surge in those human metapneumovirus cases in China, HMPV, it's a reminder of the ongoing threat of infectious diseases.
Absolutely. No matter how much progress we make, there's always something new, something unexpected. Global health surveillance is crucial.
And robust healthcare systems
Mhm.
and international cooperation. We can't tackle these challenges in isolation.
Couldn't agree more. And speaking of tackling challenges, let's loop back to Chhattisgarh and their innovative approach to green GDP. It's not just a local initiative, it really reflects a global shift in thinking about how we measure progress.
It's about recognizing the economic value of natural capital, not just focusing on traditional metrics like timber production.
Chhattisgarh is taking those ecosystem services into account, things like clean air and water regulation, recognizing those things as essential for sustainable development.
It's about understanding that a healthy environment is crucial for a healthy economy and for the well-being of people.
And for those preparing for the UPSC, this example highlights how intertwined environmental concerns are with economic policy and governance. These issues can't be separated anymore.
Now, before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to touch on a crucial aspect of the World Trade Organization framework that we haven't discussed yet. The Agreement on Sanitary and Phytosanitary Measures, or SPS agreement.
The SPS agreement. It might sound technical, but it's incredibly relevant, especially for those interested in international trade and agriculture. Even public health ties into it.
The SPS agreement focuses on food safety and animal and plant health regulations, making sure those measures aren't misused as trade barriers.
Finding a balance between protecting health, human, animal, and plant health, and also making sure trade flows smoothly, and that regulations are based on science, not just arbitrary protectionism.
So, for example, if India wants to export its mangoes to another country, that country can't just impose random restrictions under the guise of phytosanitary concerns.
Exactly. The SPS agreement helps ensure fair play in agricultural trade.
And this is where it gets interesting for UPSC aspirants. The SPS agreement intersects with so many different areas: international law, trade policy, agricultural practices, environmental concerns, even consumer protection.
It's a great example of how interconnected everything is in the real world. One agreement can touch on so many different aspects of global governance.
And that interconnectedness makes preparing for the UPSC such a challenge. It's not just about knowing facts. It's about making connections, understanding the nuances, and seeing the bigger picture.
It's amazing, right? How one agreement can have such wide-ranging impacts. But it really underscores that interconnectedness, like you said. And that brings us back to Chhattisgarh and their approach to green GDP.
Yeah, it's not just a local thing. It's part of a bigger shift globally.
It really makes you think, how would things change if we factored environmental costs into our economic indicators, like GDP, for instance?
It's a big question. Would we see different policies? Would governments be more hesitant to approve projects that harm the environment, even if those projects promise quick economic gains?
Would businesses start prioritizing sustainability, knowing that their environmental footprint could impact their bottom line? Would consumers make different choices, choosing products that are more eco-friendly?
So many possibilities.
Yeah.
Imagine a world where sustainability is built into our economic systems from the ground up. It's a pretty compelling vision. And for those gearing up for the UPSC, understanding those links between the environment, the economy, governance, it's absolutely crucial.
The UPSC exams aren't just about rote memorization. They're about developing that critical understanding of the challenges facing India and the world.
Thinking about solutions, seeing the bigger picture. And that's what we've tried to do in this deep dive.
We've covered a lot of ground, from Chhattisgarh's Green GDP initiative to those exciting developments in space technology.
Global trade, health, key policies, institutional updates, even inspiring figures from India's past. It's been a whirlwind tour.
We hope it's given you some valuable insights, sparked your curiosity to explore these topics further.
Remember, knowledge is power, but applying that knowledge to make a real difference, that's what really matters.
So keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep striving to make a positive impact.
And if you enjoyed this deep dive, please subscribe to our channel and give us a like.
It helps others find this kind of content and join the conversation.
Until next time, keep diving deep into that world of knowledge.